Americans sure like their stuffing this time of year. How about I show you a German recipe that's a perfect side for anything with gravy. It's easy to make and it's a little bit different than stuffing. Let's jump right in. These are semmelknoedel, or translated stale bread dumplings. They're usually made from stale white bread. Of course, this time of year, every store offers you the stuffing or stuffing bread. So this is unflavored. This is just dried bread. That's it. Traditionally, you would use the stale bread from a few days old that's just getting rubbery and you don't really want to eat anymore as a sandwich or something. For the other ingredients, we need eggs, we need nutmeg, we need butter, we need a little bit of onion and a little bit of parsley, which we're going to have to chop. Other than that, I'm going to set up a pot with salted water later for boiling these things. And I've got some milk on the stove back there to heat up because we're going to have to rehydrate the bread. And particularly, I'm going to do both variations with the fully dried bread and the still semi-soft bread because this bread needs a lot more soaking. Start with slicing our bread. I'm just using a serrated knife and you just cut thin pieces, you know, they don't have to be particularly uniform or anything. They just need to be thin. Technically, you can use pretty much any bread for it that doesn't have seeds or nuts in it. Yeah, you could use your leftover sourdough from last week. Let me toss this into a bowl and just tear it up a little. So this is the first one, or just shredded bread. Now I'm just going to use the bread stuffing that I got at the grocery store. And I'm using half this bag. There we go. That'll do. I'm going to have to eat those dumplings for a week. Luckily, there's a lot of applications for this. So these I'm just going to crumble up by leaning into them and throwing half of them on the floor. Next step for both is warm milk, and while I heat that up on the stove, I'm quickly going to chop my parsley because we're going to need that later. If you're chopping fresh herbs, the easiest way is to kind of like push them into a ball or a roll, and that way you can just slice it down. The milk needs to be warm, not boiling. There, it starts steaming, that's warm enough. Obviously, you need a lot less milk for the still semi-soft bread compared to the really hard dried stuff. So we'll add some here first. And add the rest here. The best way of dealing with this is with your bare hands. I usually use a glove simply because it's so much easier to clean afterwards. You don't have the stuff under your fingernails. Oh, this is hot. The fresher bread is already starting to break up and clumping together. Yeah, so if you have a 2, 3, 4 day old white bread sitting around that nobody wants to eat anymore, this is the application for it. Now with this, we have a lot of hard pieces in here. So this, I'm just gonna let sit for another 10, 15 minutes. So you may have to add a little bit more milk. This is simply go by feel. You know, it should be sticky like this. You should be able to form balls from it, but you don't want the hard pieces. So we'll continue with the soft stuff here. I'm gonna add an egg. For that amount, 1 egg is plenty. So traditionally, this is just made from stale bread, but bread consistencies in the US are a little bit different. I'm always adding either a few breadcrumbs or a little bit of standard all-purpose flour to it. So that way I make sure they don't fall apart when I start boiling them later. If it is too soft, you accidentally put too much milk in, or the egg made it too moist, then you can correct it with some extra breadcrumbs. We let those two guys rehydrate, and in the meantime, I'm going to use the butter and the onions and just sweat the onions in a pan over there so that they're getting translucent and are cooked a little bit, because they won't cook from the boiling process completely. We need to pre-cook those. Been a few minutes later, this is setting up nicely. See, this is really solid. The other one I'm not perfectly happy with yet. I'm still feeling a few hard bits and pieces in here, but we haven't put an egg in yet, so we're gonna do that. That should give us some extra moisture, actually too much moisture. So I'm gonna add a few breadcrumbs to this, for one as a glue and the second to suck up the extra moisture. Let's split up the parsley between the two of them. Let's also split up the onions we prepared. I'm gonna go half here, half there with a little bit of fat. Of course, normally you wouldn't do 2 pots. I'm just doing this to show you that there's different types of bread you can use. Well, of course, let it cool to a comfortable temperature for your hands. Don't burn your hands. We need to season this, so I'm gonna start with some nutmeg. We will be cooking this in salted water, so don't overdo it with the salt. Then a couple grains of black pepper. We need a pot with simmering salted water next. On this one you can add quite a pinch of salt. Make that 2 or 3 actually. And just bring that to a simmer. So now I'm just moistening my hands. And I'm forming dumplings the size I want them. I always want them fairly small, because then they look prettier on the plate. You can use them on anything that has a gravy or a sauce and is savory. I'd like to remind you to subscribe, and of course I'm always happy about a thumbs up or a comment. This one's ready now. So again, here's the result. That's the ones with the completely dry bread, and that's the ones with the stale bread. Let's boil these things. This happens on a low simmer. Once they swim up, add another 10 minutes. You can't really overcook them. These will sink down to the bottom, or they should. Make sure they don't stick to the bottom. So after a minute or two, just gently push them around to make sure they're all able to float up. See, they're already floating up. When they float up, add at least another 10 minutes. Depending on the size and the consistency, you're looking at 15 to 25 minutes total time. Don't worry about these little breakouts. That's just bread that's set on the surface. The thing about dumplings, the water should not move a lot, because that will break them apart. Now let's put the other ones in. It's been a few minutes. Let's make sure those guys don't stick to the bottom. So either push them around or wiggle the pot a little, and then you'll see whether they stuck to the bottom or not. See, now they are starting to float up. So those guys were stuck a little. All right, these things are done. Let me pull them out. All right, here's the result. These are the stale bread ones. So let's just cut one and see how it goes. Nice, firm, good consistency, perfect. Let me take a second fork. Yeah, there's not really much of a difference. Let's do a quick taste test. It's a good dumpling. Pretty much the same dumpling. Aside from temperature, since I cooked these first and they're almost cold now, I don't really have much of a difference. The only difference there is how long you have to soak the completely dry bread to reach the same result. Stick around for my next video, because there I'm going to show how to make a lentil dish that uses these roasted in butter.